Hey guys, Stephanie here and welcome to the Aeroponic Tower channel. Today I want to share my tips and my experience on starting hydroponic seeds. So hydroponic seed starting, how to germinate seeds in rock wool, and the best way to germinate seeds for hydroponics. I start all my seeds in rock wool, and for a couple of reasons. You can start your seeds in rock wool, which is a woven lava rock. It's very spongy, has a lot of space so that the roots can grow through it very easily. Or you can also use cocoa coir, which I believe is coconut husk, ground into what looks like potting soil, and it's in a little case. I use rock wool because of the cost. I can buy this bulk, and I will put a link to where I get that in bulk below. So a rock wool cost me 2 cents. With hydroponic seed starting, within any seed starting, you're going to have seeds that don't germinate, plants that start off great and then die. It just happens. There's loss when it comes to starting seeds in any gardening situation. We want to keep that as low as possible, and I'm going to share some of the things you shouldn't do that I have done and some tricks to getting better germination. But it happens, and so I want to keep my cost as low as possible. So if I'm spending 30 cents, I don't know what cocoa coir is, I just know it was more expensive, or if I'm not buying this rock wool in bulk, it can be a little bit pricey. When you lose one of these, if it costs 25 cents, that can add up if you're growing a lot of things. I believe in doing a super fast turnaround with seeds and growing in an aeroponic system. I have a video, I will link that below, on my formula, but I start seeds every 2 weeks, no matter what. And I have a lot of towers, you can see behind me. So this is more seeds than most people are starting at once. Typically people are starting, if you have 1 or 2 towers, you may be starting 8 to 15 seeds every 2 weeks if you're following my formula. So the good thing even with me having 6 towers, and starting 2 trays almost every 2 weeks, it's still a pretty simple, low cost, very minimal equipment required setup, which is great because when I do my in-ground gardens, it's different. I have to have soil, I've got to have a lot of things, a lot of seed starting trays because I'm doing a bunch of things at once, greenhouse, or you would need a lot of big lighting systems. With this, we really only need a couple of things. So let me go through what those are. When you start your seeds, you're gonna need your rock wool and you need a tray. This is a tray that doesn't have dividers. It's just a flat bottom tray, and I can stick an entire sheet of rock wool in this. I prefer this one just because it's easy to stick the sheet in there. Another option is one with dividers, which is this one. This one you have to break each piece of rock wool apart to put it in there. If you're doing 8, 10, 15 seeds, it doesn't really matter. You can put them all along the middle, and I'll talk about light in a minute. I just happened to grab this one and went ahead and filled it when I was doing my seed starting. With these seeds, I was gonna wait until the next time I started seeds, and I was gonna do everything perfect so I could share with you the optimal stuff you're supposed to do to start your seeds and what that looks like. I decided to go ahead and make this video with these particular seedlings because I did a lot of things that were not optimal. And I thought it would be best to share with you my experience on real life growing and what that actually looks like. AI can write a blog post in 30 seconds on how to start seeds for hydroponics and tell you all the best practices. But the reality is it's been freezing outside. So I've had days where I went to get water and the hoses were frozen. So I just came up with a plan B really quick. We've been busy. So I've taken shortcuts as far as lights and things like that. And I still have all these starts. So I'm gonna share all of that with you too. So you can see what it looks like when you do things wrong, and how do you problem solve, and what is doing well here and what needs a little bit of assistance, and how to spot those things. So for growing, you need your rock wool and you need your tray. I also highly recommend a heat mat. This is by Vivo Sun, and I will link a kit below that comes with a heat mat, the tray, a dome, and everything that I think is really great because it's super affordable, simple, and inexpensive. And you want a heat tray. I have found when I use a heat tray and a dome that goes over the top, my germination rate is really fast, and I have a lot higher success rate with germination than if I just put these under the light with no heat mat, or put these under the light with a heat mat but no dome. So I highly recommend the tray, heat lamp, dome, and then you need grow lights. I prefer with my hydroponic seeds starting to do everything tabletop level. When I'm growing things outside, like I mentioned, it's big and complicated and you need a lot of things. With hydroponics, the reason I grow like this is because I want fast turnaround. I want access to grocery store type foods all the time, every single day, and I want it to be simple. And so this is all I need to get started. It's just something I can stick right on the counter. I have a little shelf over to the side that I can put this on. So because I start so many seeds at once in a tray, I have 2 of these lights. This light is by Fairy Morse, and I like these lights. I like them a lot. They're easy. I just put 2 of them side by side. I will link this below. The only thing with this light is it's pretty expensive. It was almost $50 just for the light. You just need some kind of simple tabletop light. You can get higher end LED lights and hang them, but then again, we're having to create systems that might be complicated. And with aeroponics, I like to keep it super simple and super cost effective, because that's my goal growing aeroponically. This is the food that replaces what I have to buy at the grocery store. This is the majority of what we eat produce wise. So what did I do right and what did I do wrong? When you start your seeds, you want to take your rock wool and soak it for 20 minutes, just in clean, unchlorinated water. And then pull it out, let it drip so that it's not there's not water pouring out of it any longer, and then put it in the tray. It gets really heavy so it can fall apart. So typically I just keep it in the tray and then tip the trays sideways and let all the water drain. Or if it's in one of these individuals, it'll drip out from the bottom and then you can just dump out this tray. But you don't want your rock wool sitting in water. And the reason for that is rock wool is very porous and it's very absorbent for water. And we need that porous texture so that the roots grow through it and create a very firm foundation by the time they're ready to go into your aeroponic system. If they're sitting in water, they can become very mushy and start to degrade. And they're gonna do that in the aeroponic tower over time as they're exposed to more and more water and as the roots start to replace the rock wool completely. But by then, your roots have a solid foundation and have established themselves, so there's a support system. If you take this rock wool, and there's no, let me see if I can find one with the roots. Well, there we go. So this one's got roots coming out. If I take this and it's already completely saturated and this rock wool is starting to fall apart because it's been sitting in water, and I go ahead and put it in my aeroponic tower, it's gonna get more water in the tower because this is on a timer and it's gonna kick on every few minutes to make sure that the roots are getting everything they need. And that rock wool can basically just fall down to the bottom of the tank, which doesn't cause any problems. We just eventually dump it out and we clean the tank and it gets recycled back into the earth. But you might not have enough root foundation if that falls apart too soon to give this lettuce its best chance at becoming a nice healthy lettuce plant in the tower. So that's why we want firm. You can see, hopefully, this is nice and firm. It's not falling apart. It's not caving in. If you push on this and it's squishing like a sponge, it has been exposed to too much water and your chances of this becoming an amazing lettuce go down. This lettuce is almost ready to go in. I like to get them a little bit bigger, so I'm gonna give this a couple more days, and I like to see roots coming out of all sides before I put it in the tower. Just some keys to look for. So this one, for example, has 2 seeds. I guess I opted to do 2 seeds on this one. This one on the left is small. This one over here took off really quickly, but I don't see any roots yet. So I want to give this one a little bit more time. I can push the bigger leaves over to one side and the smaller over to the other so they can get their optimal light. And I'm just gonna give it a couple more days and see if I can't get a good root foundation in this and a little bit more size on the leaves, and then they go into the tower. So soaking for 20 minutes, making sure none of it's sitting in water. Then you're gonna put your seeds in your rock wool. How many seeds depends on what you're growing. That's a whole nother video. But let's assume I stick one seed in here. If this was, I think this is spinach. I can't tell. So you put your seeds in, then you're gonna top it with vermiculite, and I will put a link to the vermiculite below. Very affordable. It's up to you. You can fill it to the top. You can fill it just a little. I tend to just do a little bit and then put it in, and it's ready to go under the lights on the heat mat with the dome top over it. And then you want to put it under the light. The optimal light is 15 hours. So that would be mimicking kind of what it would get daylight, and it gives those seeds time to rest in the dark. Now I broke a lot of these rules. Left my lights on for 24 hours. And I just have been in a season where I've been too busy. We've got too much in and out of the house that I knew if I turned them off, I probably wouldn't turn them back on. So I opted to just keep the lights on full time. Sometimes that can cause a problem. I have found with these tabletop lights, they're not strong enough to really cause any damage. I have a LED light that is a lot stronger, and that one, if I left it on 24 hours, would dry the rock wool out too fast and would burn the tops. So if you've got one of these domes that has the built-in light, like I'm gonna link below, or this Fairy Morse light, just a simple tabletop grow light, it's not strong enough to cause any damage. So you're okay if you have to do that, no big deal. And my point in sharing this video of how I did things wrong was to show you that even if you don't follow things to the book, that you can still have great success starting your seeds. And a lot of the information out there is actually contradicting. Some will say you have to start your seeds in the dark if you want great root foundation and have them sitting in a little bit of water. Others will say never start them in the dark. Seedlings need light to germinate. And the answer is both. Some seeds like to be dark and cold to get started in the germination process. Some need light to germinate. And I have found just covering them with a little vermiculite allows those that need dark to have enough darkness, and those that need light can kind of peek through and germinate with the little light that's coming through. So it's just finding that balance of how much time you have to invest into your seed starting, and you can have great success just by doing it and learning what works best for you for the things you're trying to grow and in your environment. I have found for the things that I grow in the tower garden, because I'm doing a lot of variety, that just putting a little vermiculite and putting it under the light on a heat pad with the dome works just fine. I will say that you want to pull the dome off once they start to leaf out and get past the sprout phase. I put the dome on this just to show you my dome, but these leafy greens are too big to be under a dome at this point. So I do like this particular setup that I found on Amazon, and I am going to purchase this, and I will link this below, because it has individual dome covers. So if you had things that hadn't sprouted yet, like I have in my trays, you could go ahead and keep those under a dome, and then the ones that have sprouted need to have a good airflow, and you can pull the dome lid off of those. I also like how the light on this is movable, and you can put it in whatever direction you feel like needs the most light. So if you notice some things aren't getting enough light, that you can just kind of move it over to the side, just like with the tower gardens. So I just wanted to share that information, because you can read that you must do it this way, you must do it that way, and this is the best practice. And really the best practice is to get out there and get experience and find what works for you with the things you're wanting to grow. And if you're not having success, then read the seed package and discover, maybe you do need to put that particular seedling somewhere in a dark, cool place with the other things in a warm place with light, and you can, accommodate those seeds as they need. So just wanted to share that. So if you see me doing some things and breaking some rules that you've heard are an absolute must, it's okay. We're never going to be able to do it perfectly. We just have to do the best we can and get out there and make sure we're doing it so that we can have consistent access to food on our towers. And let's address the algae. So some people get really concerned about algae, and that's the green stuff on the top here. When you're growing hydroponic seeds, starting seedlings in the artificial light, you're gonna get algae. It's when algae and nutrients come together that it grows, and it's just like the perfect medium for it. So it happens. It's not a big deal. I rarely have them that don't have algae when I'm growing them specifically inside. If I'm starting them outside in the spring and the weather's amazing, it's not so much of an issue, but it is something you're gonna see if you're growing your seedlings indoors. There's a trick to keeping it down on this one here. I covered the top with vermiculite, and if the top is covered, the light can't get to it as much, and so you won't have that algae bloom as much. There's still some on the side that wasn't covered. I also made a mistake with these. You always want to water from the bottom. You don't want to pour your water, and let me address the water first. When you start your seeds, it's just water. When they get to a certain size, you want to start giving them nutrients, and it's because the seed casing has everything it needs for that seed to start life and to be fed. But it's gonna get to a point where there's nothing left and water's not gonna cut it. If your growth starts to stop, it's time to feed them. If you start to see signs like this, where there's white or yellowing, that's a good sign that it's time for some nutrients. This one actually has some roots coming through the bottom, and it still seems kind of small, but it's obviously ready for some nutrients. Another thing that can cause this white is too much light exposure, and because I have the light on 24 hours, that would be one of the things I'd think, okay, maybe that's the problem, except for the fact the ones that are doing this are all off in the far corners that get the least amount of light, and it's kind of leggy. Leggy is when your sprout is got a long stem and is growing more stem faster than it's starting to bulk out on the leaf on top. Now, some plants tend to do that a little bit more than others, just by the nature of the plant. But you can see this one's short and squatty, and this one over here is really tall. That tells me this one's not overexposed to light. It's been exposed to too little light, if anything, and it just needs some nutrients. So those are some things to look out for. As far as nutrients, recommended is to take half a dose of what the tower does. So I just pull it right out of my towers. I don't see any sense in mixing up special water. I just take a cup full right out of the tower and dilute it down with another cup full, and then pour that on the bottom, and then drain out any excess. Once they've soaked it in for a second, you can give them a few minutes to just soak it all in. You don't have to dump it in and then dump it right back out. But you want to dump that water into, let me see if I can do this, the bottom of the tray and not on top of the seedlings, and then move the tray around and let it kind of get on all the different plants and all the different rock wool on the bottom. It'll keep the grow solution off the top, so that'll help with algae. Like I mentioned before, soggy. This one's a little too dry. You can start to see it's getting very pale and dried out along the edges. It's actually still very wet to the touch, but this is a sign it's time to start watering. We don't want them any drier than that, but we also do not want them sitting in water or saturated and soggy. So another thing that can happen when you're growing on these trays is, and if you have a full tray like this, it's a little bit more of a problem. If you're starting 8, 10, 15, 20 seeds, you want to keep your seeds where the light is mostly. So if you have one light in the center, then you'd want to put your 20 starts along the center, and then keep an eye out for things like this one. So this is a super healthy start. It's squatty, it's not leggy, everything's a nice green, it's not dried out, it's nice and like the perfect moisture. And then if you look on the bottom, I don't know if you guys can see that, it is just packed full of roots that are poking out the bottom. It's establishing a nice root base. This will be ready to go into the tower in another few days. When those leaves, these are the the microgreen leaves, so the first leaves that come out. And then from here, you'll start to get the actual leaf of the plant, and these go away. I'm pretty sure this is kale. So once these start to leaf out and produce the kale leaves, then it's ready to go in. I don't like to put my starts in when they're still in this phase. What I found was this smaller one here was actually in this spot initially, and it's smaller than all the others. So it's not getting the same amount of light that the ones in the middle are. So I want to switch it up and give this one an opportunity to get a little bit more light. So you want to just look at your starts. Some of my lettuce, these are all Salanova lettuce. The butter, the red butter seems to be growing faster, the green butter. And then this lighter gray one, this is a Crispina, I think it's called. And those are a little bit smaller. That's the same variety. So I can tell like the same types of lettuce are growing a little bit slower. That means there's no problem. But if I have some butter lettuce and I've got one that's doing amazing, and then next to it one that's super tiny, and there's a bunch of tiny ones, then there's something going on, and you may want to move your seedlings around and help free up some space. Put this one that's got lots of big leaves over, you know, towards the back here where it's going to get a little bit less light, and then free up some space for those smaller ones in the middle to get a little bit more light. This one right here has a seed casing on it, and these are easy to get off. But if you see that after the leaf comes out, we do want to get that off. I can't do it right now, but Roots and Refuge Farm, she says to lick her fingers and pulls it off. I don't want to lick my fingers because they had vermiculite on them. But you want to be careful and definitely get that seed covering off once it started to, once it has established leaves this size. There's another one towards the bottom here. I'm not going to mess with that one. That one's still delicate and small and has an opportunity. But for whatever reason, these bigger ones just didn't want to come off. There we go. So I got those off. You can also do this with all your plants. I'll walk by and just kind of touch them like this. And the reason is it makes the stems a little bit stronger and just helps the plant overall. In nature, these wouldn't be in a stagnant, sterile environment. They'd be blown by the wind. They'd be stepped on by bugs, animals. So it just helps them to kind of get a little bit stronger when they're in this baby phase and growing. There is some talk out there around Tower Garden where you're supposed to do half the nutrient amount when you put new seedlings in your tank. I have never done that, and because I'm a believer in fast turnover and growing a lot of variety, it's not even possible for me to do that because I have tomatoes and eggplants and peppers growing on the same tower that I have lettuce and kale and things that are quick turnover. So I need my nutrients to be at full capacity. Personally, I have never seen any problems. The real problem I see is the over soggy rock wool and putting them into the tower too early. So looking at all these starts, the only thing that's even close to being ready, just to give you an idea what that looks like, is the lettuce. And even that I'm gonna give a couple of days. I wanna see more roots coming out of the bottom of these. I wanna see roots coming out of all four sides. And I would like a little bit more surface area and size to the top of these lettuce. Some of these kale, they're gonna shoot up really quick. They've got tons of roots coming out. There's roots on all four sides, so they check that box for me, but they don't have any of those mature leaves yet. These leaves are all those baby greens. These are not ready. I need to see some of those leaves, but it's gonna happen quickly because of how much root foundation is in here. And there's a lot of root foundation in here because this is like 15 seeds too. I'm doing those for baby greens. Basil, you want to be very, very careful with basil. Basil should stay in a very firm rock wool cube. It's very prone to diseases. And I don't know if you guys can see that, but basil doesn't get a long stem for quite some time. It kind of sprouts with its leaves inside the rock wool. I've actually found it's helpful when you're doing basil starts to put some vermiculite into the hole, then the basil seeds, then top it. And that just gets them a little bit closer to the surface, because there's one coming out the top here, but these other basils are so far in there and they have all their leaves popping out, and it just makes them prone to kind of getting overexposed to water and having them just kind of turn into nothing and die off from being overwatered. This particular set, I did not do the vermiculite, and then the basil seeds, completely forgot about it when I was doing them. The other thing I did wrong on this, and the one thing you want to keep and be mindful of, is most seeds like to grow on the heat pad, with the light, with the dome. There are a couple of exceptions. Sometimes cilantro likes it a little bit cooler, and I have cilantro that will sprout this way, and sometimes I've found it just is a little finicky and I need to keep it off of the heat mat, and it likes to just be a little bit cooler. The other one is spinach. I forgot completely that I started spinach. I believe it's these over here, because nothing's coming up and I can see little starts on all of these. Spinach likes it to be really dark and really cold to germinate. So I need to pull my spinach out, put them in a dark, cool spot. Once they turn into their spinach leaf, a spinach leaf comes out kind of like a stem with two really pointy leaves on it going in each direction. Hard to describe. Once it does that, then I can put it on the heat mat in the dome and it's fine. It's just the germination. It's just getting that seed to pop open requires dark and cold when it comes to spinach. So be mindful of that. You may want to read your package on your seeds. Most of them like the heat and like the dome and the humidity and the light. There's just a few exceptions to those. And the last thing I wanted to discuss is the best way to germinate seeds for hydroponics. When you're doing brassicas, greens, what else is in here? We talked about spinach and cilantro, parsley and basil, pretty neutral. They like, parsley likes, or not parsley, basil likes heat. It's a summer plant, so keeping it on the mat is good for that one. All of those do well in the setup I said, with the heat mat, with the dome. When it comes to peppers, eggplants, tomatoes, I like to do it a little bit differently, and I do a trick. I think it has a name, but I don't remember the name of this trick. It has a name. But one of the things I like to do for the peppers and eggplants and tomatoes, I'm trying to think what else I would do this for. Usually just those. I can't think of anything else that I use this method for, is the paper towel method. And you take a paper towel and you get it really wet. I just stuck it in regular water, not in water with nutrients in it. So just plain water. And then you want to take your pepper seeds, and I'm about to start enough peppers to do an entire tower. This is super exciting. I love peppers. If I was smart, I would label these, but I'm not going to. I'm gonna go ahead and get all my peppers started for my tower. I'm gonna do an entire tower of peppers with one row of eggplant mixed into it. I'm a huge pepper eater, so I wanna try all these different varieties. So this is an albino bullnose and a dottle. This one's a great one. Murasaki purple. It's a sweet, these are all sweet peppers. I'm not doing hot on this tower. I'll grow hot in the ground and maybe reserve 2 tower spots for some hot ones. Oh, this is shishito, hard to say. This one's really great cooked. I love the pimento. I have a couple of reds that I want to do. I liked this lively Italian orange and a sweet Hungarian. So I'm going to start all of these. Ideally, I will end up with 2 to 3 plants of each of these peppers, and that will guarantee that I have enough pimento going at all times. So if I want to have 2 plants or 3 plants, I'm going to take double that in seeds and get them started. And you just put them on your paper towel like this. And if I don't care if I only have 2 plants versus 3, like if 3 is important, start 6 seeds. If you could live with just 2 or 1, then you know, you only have to start 3 or 4. Red pepper is very important to me. Probably start 7 of these. I'd like to have 4 red pepper plants. So let's start 7. My seeds are good and I'm familiar with my seeds, so I'm not as worried about the germination rate of these. But the reason I'm doing this is because the germination rate on peppers, eggplant, not so much tomatoes, they're pretty quick, but the germination rate is long. Peppers take a while, they need heat, they definitely need to be on the heat mat. With the light, the eggplant as well, and the tomatoes. And I've just found that if you put 1 seed in the rock wool with peppers, it might not germinate and you have lost the money investment into that rock wool. When it comes to peppers and eggplant, I found that failure rate is a little bit higher in the rock wool. So I start them this way. That way I know they germinated for sure. And then I can take the sprouted seed and put that into a rock wool, and I know at that point the seed was good and I'm not wasting any rock wool. With something like lettuce, it's too hard to do that because lettuce seeds are so tiny and so delicate that they would just break and fall apart. It's better to just add 2 or 3 lettuce seeds into the rock wool if you're concerned about germination, and thin them to 1 seed versus doing it this way. But with these larger seeds and these a little bit more finicky plants, this is the method that works best, I have found. So I'm not gonna have any clue what these are until they fruit, so that'll be fun. It's always a mystery. But I'm making sure I get lots of each one. This is a sweet Hungarian. I'm super excited for pepper season. I did not plan my gardens very well, and I let all my peppers kind of burn out in the fall and didn't start new peppers until late fall, early winter. So I do have pepper plants in my towers, and they will start to fruit very early in the spring, so way before anything in the garden would ever fruit. So I will have peppers a lot earlier than I would if I was growing them outside. But I won't have them in the winter right now. So next year I want to time that a little bit better so that I do have peppers to harvest during the winter, because big fan of eating red peppers and orange peppers in my soups, and it's a great time of year for soups. All right, so we have lots of pepper seeds here. I'm gonna take another paper towel and get it wet. Flatten this out. And then I'm just gonna fold it in twice. And that's it. This goes in a baggie. If you leave it in this baggie for more than a couple of days, it can get moldy and ick. So check on it after 24 hours and see. And once they break out of the shell, once the bottom root, you'll see a root that forms and busts out of the shell and starts to take shape, almost like a little curve. And it'll have little roots off of it. I'm talking very small, just millimeters. But once that root comes out and has a little bit of size and shape to it, then you can take them out and just carefully, if you want to use tweezers, I just use my fingers. Then you put that in the rock wool, cover it with the vermiculite, put it on your heat pad with the dome under the lights, and your peppers and your eggplant are on their way. I hope I covered everything for you guys as far as how to hydroponically start seeds for your aeroponic towers or your hydroponic system, whatever you're using. This goes for any system. So there's hydroponics with NFT, there are aeroponic towers, and then the tower gardens, I kind of call them a hybrid, and I mentioned that before, between the two. And the reason is some aeroponic towers, you cannot grow big peppers, zucchini, squash. If I was starting squash, by the way, I just put 1 seed, green beans. Well, I would put a squash, I would put 1 seed into the rock wool, cover it with vermiculite. That's all that's needed for squash. With green beans, I try to do 2 or 3 seeds. With peas, I tried to do minimum 3 The most would be 4. Otherwise they start to get jammed up and get a little moldy. So just know you can grow all of those things if you're doing an aeroponic tower garden, but some aeroponic systems are just set up for lettuce, and it's just the way they're designed. They couldn't handle the size of doing an entire tower of green peppers. Whatever system you have, this will work whether you're growing big foods, squashes, or whether your system's just set up to grow lettuce and herbs. This method, some basic, simple things: heat mat, clean water, rock wool, dome cover, and a light is really all you need to get started and to have successful seed sprouts. And even when you do it all wrong, like I did, because life gets busy, it still works and you can still have great success. So happy gardening, guys. Post any comments or questions below, and I would love to hear some feedback on some of the successes you've had growing hydroponic seeds. Have a beautiful day.